make sure I have the right gear and equipment I need to succeed.
Your donation will create a lasting impact in our community.
With your donations, you will help me in achieving my goals.
We need your support.
We are part of something great.
Yeah, let's go. 6:30. All right, it being 6:30, I will call this meeting to order. We are the Oregon Board of Education. It's Monday, October 9th at 6:30. We are here at the Oregon High School Innovation Center. Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Bijak? Here. Dr. Bush? Here. Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Wright?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
All right, board does have a quorum. And note that Ms. Flanagan is coming to us via the phone, so we will be conducting all voting via roll call tonight. Katie has provided us with the appropriate documentation for that this meeting has been noticed. So we will go to the approval of the agenda. Tonight we have three action items, one being the co-curricular compensation schedule, two being condition of payment for transportation contractors, and the third is our 4K contract. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Heather, second by Mary. Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Next up, we have the consent calendar. So tonight we have our normal consent calendar. Note that we do have 3 months of financial statements tonight. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Leslie, motion. Is there a second?
Sure.
Heather with the second. Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. I do want to back up and thank our donations for this month. So we have Fidelity Charitable with a donation of $600 for the second grade Scarborough classroom. Nicole Buell with a donation of $1,500 for the Jeremy Buell Memorial Scholarship. Audrey Eppel with $200 for children's school supplies. Oregon Area Food Pantry, a donation of $2,500 for food service balances for students who do not qualify for free or reduced lunch, but they have applied. Fidelity Charitable again with a $300 donation to the Netherwood Knoll Library. Oregon Brooklyn Optimist Club, $3,835 for the splash pad. Tim and Susie LeBrun, $640.95 for the splash pad. Oregon PTO, $5,200 donation to Netherwood Knoll. And Oregon PTO with $5,500 to the Prairie View classroom and building needs. So a big thank you to these individuals and organizations for these very generous donations totaling over $20,000 this month. Let's see here. Next up, we have public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment this evening? Katie, has anyone registered? Is there anyone here for public comment? A third time, anyone here for public comment? No, so we will move on to the OEA report. And I don't see anyone. Oh, Nate's here, but no report tonight. And students are not here yet due to homecoming week. So we will move right on to action items. Let's see, before we dive into action items, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to give us an overview of these 3 items tonight.
Thank you. I just want to talk for a minute about the fact that while they might not seem to be on the surface, that all 3 of these pieces are connected. They're all topics that we will be diving into as a group in the committee of a whole structure over the course of the next school year, because the important steps we're asking you to take tonight related to all 3 of these topics are, as I said, important next steps. But all of these topics are part of a greater picture, in addition to facilities planning and a couple of other pieces that we really need to be able to dive into and look at as far as long-term sustainability and flexibility within the system, while meeting the needs of our students that are varied and wide. The co-curricular schedule, as an example, you'll see the addition of things because our students have an amazing amount of interests, and we have a rising number of students who are connected to co-curriculars. And that's something we should all be very proud of, but it does put I guess I'd say a strain on the current financial components of the system. So how are we going to look at this long term, knowing that our students are active and involved? So tonight's one step, but we'll be talking about this more in the future. And the same goes for 4K and transportation, because both are really supported by amazing long-term partners that we want to continue to partner with. But we also know that both are significantly impacted by the tighter labor market and the rising costs of all things. So those are also topics we'll be diving into in a more in-depth way over the course of the year to learn how we can continue with all that is good and continue to get even better in the areas where we're facing challenges. So I just wanted to put it all together into context, because while they might seem unrelated, they are very connected. All the things we're talking about tonight are a part of our broader picture related to how to meet the needs of our students with the way things are changing. Thank you. That's the co-curricular schedule, and this has been the work of Gina Jonan from HR, and with a lot of consultation with other groups. So if you'd like to get started, Gina.
Thank you. So we are seeking approval tonight for a new co-curricular schedule for the 23-24 school year. As Dr. Bergstrom articulated, we know that co-curriculars are very important to our students. That has struck me several times when we have students come back and talk to us about their most memorable experiences, that co-curriculars are often the most mentioned part of their school experience. We do have a number of students that participate, and we have about 85% of our students in grades 7 to 12 that participate at least in one school activity. We know that's more if you look at activities outside of school like dance, looking at Dr. Lakuta. We would love that number to be 100%. And as Dr. Bergstrom stated, that a way for us to get there is by offering activities that our students are interested in, and more importantly, having advisors for those activities. So this is something that's been our goal for a long time. We haven't raised or really modified the schedule very much since 2016. So we are seeking to raise the schedule by 2%. We certainly wish that it was higher. It is part of the operational referendum that was passed by the community in 2022. We have been meeting with the committee of the OEA, as well as Andy Weiland and Lisa Christensen from HR to help us navigate this process. And so overall, they are in agreement with our recommendation tonight. Our next steps after this, just to let you know, is we did talk about one of our goals for this year being how to having a process to add new clubs to the schedule. So how this process was done is we received feedback from staff who were doing clubs that they volunteered to do. And we had a number of those. We still have other clubs that that advisors volunteer for. And so we did a survey of staff asking them which co-curriculars are you offering for, on a voluntary basis, how often do you meet, how many students do you serve, et cetera. And looking at those survey results, tried to add as many as we could to the schedule for those clubs that are longstanding. But what it brought to light is that we really want to have a process on how we add new clubs to the schedule. And also if a club feels that they're in the wrong tier, how that tier would be changed. So I have reached out to other districts to see what they do and the processes that they have. And so that'll be work that we will continue to do with the OEA hopefully this year and have a recommendation for you next year on a process. So with that in mind, if you look at the schedule, you will see the amounts in green is the 2% increase that we are recommending. It comes to about $75,000, which will be funded through the referendum, but that does not include lacrosse. Lacrosse was added, and that is a separate by the board in a previous meeting, so that was separate funding source for that. If you look at the activities in yellows, those are the ones that we are proposing that you add to the schedule. So you'll see lacrosse there that was already approved by the board. So you'll see the tier that was put in. We try to look at where is a comparable tier for the activity. Prior to my time, Mr. Weiland had a study done of the co-curriculars, and that's how they were placed in these different tiers. And that was at least over 10 years now. So you'll see why we want to process about how we could maybe change a tier in the future. In terms of athletics, that is something that Ms. Spencer Grant is studying very carefully. We know that we have more and more students participating in athletics overall, which is wonderful. So you will see there that we are proposing to add another wrestling assistant coach. We have our number of girls who are going out for wrestling is growing. And so that's just really exciting. And so just feeling like, given the safety of that sport and the intense coaching that is needed, that we're proposing adding a coach for wrestling. And then the rest are really, you'll see, and then we have mainly other clubs. Ultimate Frisbee is not a WIA sport, but we have a number of students that participate, and they do a lot in Ultimate Frisbee. They have a lot of competitions and a lot of practices. And that has been going at least since I've been here, so 10 years now. So that's a really popular club. So you'll see that added. I did meet with Mr. Weiland and the staff who do the musical and the play. And that is something that they felt pretty passionately about, is that we need to pay our choreographer and our orchestra person. And when we looked at the number of students, they have over 100 students that participate in some manner or another in the play and the musical. So I want to support those, and that'll be a future goal, is to try to pay more of those positions as the productions just get amazing every year and take more time and need more expertise. And then you'll see a number of clubs that we are proposing to add. These are clubs that our students really enjoy. They've been longstanding clubs, and our staff have been doing it on a voluntary basis for years. So we're just grateful to have some funds to get them compensation and get them added to the schedule. Mr. Weiland, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
So with that, I will turn it back to the board president, or acting president.
Thank you, Ms. Jonan. So why don't we start with clarifying questions? I'll start with Mary. Go ahead. Heather, you're up next.
On Appendix A, can you just clarify a few things for me? So, for example, under the line item basketball head boys and girls, that's 2 FTE, but a 5,499 and change. Is that the total amount for 2, or is that per each? Or yeah.
Yes, thank you. I should have explained that. So if you see a 2 there, that means 2 FTE. So we have a basketball head coach for boys, and so we're proposing that go to 5,499.84, and then we also have a head coach for girls, and that would be the same amount. So that is the amount per FTE.
And so each of these groupings separated by a dotted line, those are the tiers that you're speaking of?
Yes, those are the tiers. That was done before my time in terms of looking at length of the season, length of practices.
Okay. All right. And so then everything in yellow highlight is newly added to the schedule?
Everything except for wrestling, we had 1, and we're looking to increase that to 2.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I wanted to make a comment. It's now the time, or should I hold that?
Let's just stick to clarifying questions.
Mary answer or ask mine.
Krista, we'll go to you next on the phone. Do you have any clarifying questions?
I just have 2 quick ones. Gina, are all coaches OSD staff members? Or all people listed on this chart in these positions, are they all OSD staff members?
So yes, they are all employees of the Oregon School District. The vast majority of them also work for us in another capacity, such as teacher or paraprofessional.
Okay, so as employees, do they go through trainings and in-services and all those sorts of things that we expect of OSD staff members, even if this is just their only position within the district?
If their only position is as coach, and we have 1 advisor who's not also a staff member in another capacity, who's a former staff member, but otherwise, I would say of the very small percentage that are employees that don't have another role, those are coaches. And so they do the legally required training, such as the mandatory report, threat of school safety, bloodborne pathogens. And then I believe Ms. Spencer Grant also has them do a training for coaches, but I'm not thinking of the name off the top of my head. But that was something that she instituted last year. But they don't come to new educator orientation, if that's the question.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about some of those things that you mentioned, and then probably for the coaches, it's probably safe sports. I just wanted to make sure that those things were covered, as that we pay them, they are employees, that they're doing those same things. So that was very helpful. Thank you.
Is that all for questions, Krista?
Yeah.
Great. So a couple of clarifying questions, and some were answered. So thank you for going over a lot of the information. One of the questions I have, I noticed that we have listed in here, for example, band or vocal music club. And I'm just wondering if something like Noteworthy or the marching band, are those covered in those extracurriculars, co-curriculars, or is that handled through classroom instruction, or do we know where those particular positions are within this group? I just don't know whether or not that's what that means.
So it depends. So when we had marching band, that was an extra contract that we worked out separately because the band was doing a lot of traveling, especially during the summer. And so
I mean like pep band even, just like at the, not necessarily the summer program.
yes, so we do provide compensation for the pep band, and we also provide compensation on the schedule for concerts in the evening. So, but there are other things, it's not music related, that like yearbook is now, even though it's on the schedule, is part of the class. And so we don't provide extra compensation for that because it's part of the teaching time. Like that's
Sure.
the class to do the yearbook. So you also raise a question that I should have mentioned, is that just because something is on the schedule doesn't mean we're running that club at any particular time, because we may not have someone who wants to do that, or the students aren't interested. So for example, forensics is a club that's on the schedule. We haven't had forensics the last few years because we didn't have students that were interested in doing that. Now this year, forensics is back. We do have a group of students that really want to do that, and they have an advisor. So just because the club is here doesn't mean it's necessarily running, but we keep it on the schedule because if it does come back, then we don't want to revisit what the compensation would be. So you'll see yearbook is on the schedule, but because that's now moved as part of the class, we don't provide compensation for that particular yearbook, although we do for other levels. So, but we keep it on because if we had a different, we might want to do yearbook differently. So then we have, at least we know what we've paid it in the past.
Okay, okay. That's helpful. The other question I had is, and maybe this is, like you said, maybe something that's going to be revisited once we kind of get ourselves trued up, so to speak, but how the tiers worked. And so it sounds to me like that predates maybe your involvement in this, but I would be curious to know what the criteria was that was used. You know, I was making some assumptions regarding, for example, the estimated number of hours that go into that particular activity, or how frequently they meet, or how long they meet. So those sorts of things I'm sure went into that calculation, but maybe we don't have more specifics on that for today's discussion, which is fine. And then my other question, I also noticed, and I think this is true, did we add a dance team this year? And is that not reflected on here, or is that a different situation?
So cheerleading and POMS is on here. Yes. So if you look in the 6.5% tier, and that's also where pep band is. So that is cheerleading and pom-poms for fall. So that is another team that some years we have interest in, some years we don't.
Okay. But I thought we had a new, okay, thank you.
Oh,
it's
thank
the same
you.
thing as, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bergstrom.
That clarifies that. Okay, great. Thanks. Those were my questions.
Dr. Bush, any clarifying questions? Ms. Wright?
So I know that we are covering lacrosse from a different funding source this year. When we are looking at next year, like how much does that look at bumping us up?
So I will look to Dr. Weiland for the funding plan for lacrosse.
Okay.
I'll go get a doctorate.
Just seeing if you're listening.
Yeah. I want to say that was in the $50,000 range. So I think two options there are, right? We figure out a way to raise revenue in that regard, or as we have the additional referendum next year, that would be the first thing that would be coming off of that amount of money.
And is that something then that we're revisiting in committee of the whole type thing?
I believe so.
Okay. All my other questions were answered.
Okay, so I have a few. First, I just want to clarify, is the 75,000, is that the 2% increase for every position plus the new positions, and that totals 75,000?
Yes, it does, except for the lacrosse. So
Correct,
it's everything but lacrosse.
Yep. And just to confirm, the $75,000, we arrived at that through referendum planning, and that was just the bucket that we set aside at that time?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So then I guess clarifying questions. I'm just noticing in the table that we have a track head boys and girls in tier 1, But then we also have a track, head boys and girls in Tier 2. The same goes for cross country in Tier 3 and Tier 4. Why are there multiple line items?
Okay, well, and I should clarify just to be precise. So we had planned 50,000 in our co-curricular bucket, and then as we went through this process, realized it was really going to be closer to 75,000. So we took a little bit from the overall salary compensation to fund the co-curricular, and we did talk with the OEA about that.
Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear, if
Okay.
we look at initial planning, it was estimated at 50,000, but then felt that we needed to add more positions in order to be consistent across who we were adding. But the end result is that we stayed within the $3 million for the referendum.
That's what I was looking for. Yep.
So in terms of the cross country and track, sometimes we have one person that does all of it, and sometimes we have two. So if we have one person that heads all of cross country, then that's one amount. If we have one that does boys and one that does girls, that's why you'll see the difference. So it really depends on the coach and what they prefer, but then also how many students we have that are participating for girls or boys.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had for questions. Thank you. So at this point, I would open it up for a motion if anyone chooses to do so.
I'll make a motion to approve the co-curricular schedule 23-24.
Motion by Mary.
I'll second that.
Second by Anna. Any discussion? Go ahead, Anna.
I just wanted to, I guess, make some observations that weren't really clarifying questions, but in total, I kind of just was numbering up, like, what are we talking about here as far as what we're adding? And it's a total of 21 activities being added to the schedule that affect 35 staff members that have been volunteering their time over however many years to offer these to our kids. So I just think this is long overdue. I'm really excited for us to be able to compensate people for the time they're putting in and providing these opportunities to our kids. So it's pretty impressive that we have people who go above and beyond without necessarily asking for money, but now we're able to give it to them. So I think it's just much deserved and well earned, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just had I didn't have any clarifying questions, but I did have a kind of an overall question, and probably something that we're going to revisit going forward. But looking, and I think it kind of follows up on what Anna just said, that in terms of adding things, where are we at in terms of big picture, and like, or what kind of room for growth do we have going forward to add new activities? Given, I was just thinking of this from, kind of a budgetary perspective, but also, not only a budgetary perspective, but part of it being a budgetary perspective, in terms of where we're at. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. So I would say, and I think non-Dr. Weiland will agree with me, that we have part 3 of the referendum for 24-25. And so our first step would be to look at, is this something that is part of the referendum funds? And so it's all, we look at that in total. So looking at where do we feel we need to be with salaries and other benefits, and then other parts, our 4K partners, our transportation partners, and then this is another piece of that referendum. So ideally we would stay within there, or we'd have to find another funding source.
Can I just elaborate? So you mentioned that you asked for a list, a survey of like, what are all of the clubs that are out there? It would be helpful to know what didn't make this list, but is actively happening, right? So if there are other people doing clubs that didn't make this list, I'd just be curious to know what they are, just for us to be aware of it, if nothing else.
As far as I know, and I'm sure I'm gonna be mistaken, as far as I know, there isn't anything running that we haven't added to the list. Now, that doesn't mean in a month that something else won't start. And that's why we feel we really need to have a process, because kids have great ideas and they want to start things all the time. And then we also have to make sure that we have the capacity to run them, right? So if we have 2 kids, we navigate that. Do we run a club, and how does that work? And then we have to find a person that's willing to do that. So
to that point, my son started a chess club when he was in 4th grade. I don't see this on the list, but I think that's okay. So.
And we do have a chess club K4 that comes and goes depending on student interest. So I know as soon as I say that, I'll get 4 emails from people that, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. So I'm sure that they are out there. Nothing to my knowledge right now, but again, our kids have awesome interests, and I think I just had an email a couple weeks ago. Can we start a Dungeons and Dragons club? Which I thought, we've had and then we haven't had, and so we're trying to see if there's student interest in doing that. So you will see all of those requests next time around.
Yes, Krista, you're up. Go ahead.
So just a couple things. I think one thing, Gina points to a new process which allows us to have an incubation period so we can determine what rises to the level of a defined club that we would pay a staff person. So I think that's one thing that's going to be very beneficial, is her going through that process where she can determine what constitutes this and give it some longevity so we can plan for it. Secondarily, these are things that Dr. Bergstrom talked about before we entered into the action items, is we're going to be looking at a whole host of programs that currently are outgrowing what typically has been allocated in the budget for them, or there are additional costs that we may need to find different source of revenue. So that's coming for the board in terms of us looking at all of these things together and holistically about our budget. We've conquered something with the referendum in terms of operational salaries and wages. Now we have to look at programs and how we're going to fund those and what decisions we need to make. So this is just an entree of some short-term things that we have to do to make sure things are whole, but we're going to be looking long-term, if that makes sense.
Are there any other comments or discussion? Mary, go ahead.
Just a comment to say that, I'm really thrilled that our district has so much diversity across the various co-curricular offerings, and to know that 85% of our students actually participate in at least one of these is very heartening, because we know that an engaged student is a much better learner. And so I wanted to just thank all of the staff, the educators who participate in this program and have volunteered their time, and now hopefully will get some compensation. Thank you.
For me, I guess I'll weigh in. I'm certainly very supportive of the addition of the programs. However, I just can't support this at this time, being it's only a 2% increase when we've been able to find ways to pay at least 4.5% to all our other groups, including our transportation contractors, which will be coming up next on the agenda. But to me, there's just too many questions about the criteria on how these tiers have been set up, and I will not be in support of this tonight. So, but we do have a motion and a second on the table, so we will go to roll call. Katie.
Dr. Lakuta? Yes. Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
No.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
No. Motion carries 5-2. Next up, we have item C2, the 2023-2024 conditions of payment for transportation. I'll start with Dr. Bergstrom.
Actually, it's Mr. Weiland.
Thank you. Similar to the next agenda item, these are contracts that we typically do each year. We may be a little bit later on them than we would like to be, but both took a little bit extra time this year to put together. So we are bringing them to you at this time for your consideration. The first one is the transportation conditions of payment. As you may recall, our contractors are a unique group that actually have limited number of contracts that they can have in our school district. Each person is limited to 4, and current policy requires them to live within the district. That might be something that we want to consider changing in the future just because of the limitations associated with it, but that has been our policy. This unique situation has provided us tremendous benefit in the past, both with service as well as, well, mostly service, trying to make sure that things that have happened in other districts haven't happened here, where we've been able to basically be able to meet the needs of our district, both in the route transportation as well as in events and sporting events and those types of things. So what we have for you this evening is the culmination of a process that actually started in late June. And we've had several different meetings with the contractors. I'll just mention that is something that's changing a little bit. In the past, in my 20-some years that I've been here, there have been a core group of bus contractors. There has been a little bit of changeover. And so the group is kind of gelling into a different group than it was when I got here 20-some years ago, and just kind of working through and basically helping them understand kind of the history that has existed, kind of the shoulders that they're standing on from prior contractors has what took a little bit of time this year. So as you can see, we're looking at changing both the mileage rate. The mileage rate is the base mileage rate. That's where the majority of the cost of this conditions of pay goes. And so that kind of encompasses everything from some hourly wages for their contractors, as well as basically maintenance and those types of things within the school bus and fuel. Now there is a fuel escalator that changes based on every month based on the cost of fuel at the local Quick Trip at noon on the first day of the month. That kind of changes that mileage rate a little bit. If fuel costs go up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. But the base kind of stays the same and works with the escalator within that. In addition, there are some new clauses in the contract this year. Probably the biggest one is something called premium pay that the contractors asked for, and this is kind of pay to basically pay for their labor, something that they're struggling with just like everybody else, related to times when school is not necessarily in session. So that could be during spring break, it could be on weekends, those types of things. The most part, this is going to impact athletics. And so when we look at distributing these budget funds, what we'll be doing is providing a certain allocation to Brittany's budget so that she has those funds to be able to pay these people and we've to the contractors. And we've actually, we'll estimate what that amount is so that that we can give her a fair amount of money to be able to pay them. The remaining portion of the budget will then which is all budgeted and covered at this point in time, will go into the transportation accounts for the route pay. So lots of other little clauses that aren't overly significant, but account to different things. Some increase in the hourly wage increase, that's a 4.5% increase there. And then a new thing related to increasing the 4K route noontime charge a little bit. Again, that's something that kind of changes somebody's day up and requires them to be available. And then the discontinuation notice, which we just put in there. We've actually been talking about it for a while, but with some of our contractors who are kind of getting closer to retirement, we felt that it was important to both recognize and kind of incentivize them to let us know as soon as possible so that we can get new contractors up and running for the next year, as well as getting new buses and whatever equipment that they may need. So that said, happy to take any questions anyone may have.
All right, thanks, Mr. Wyland. We'll start with clarifying questions. We'll start on this side of the room with Ms. Wright.
So there's quite a few things I've actually got questions about. On the back of the purple sheet where it talks about that we have full bus ridership, are all of our buses at capacity or are they over capacity? Where are we at with that balance?
Yeah, so bus capacity works on two different planes. One is time, and the other one is capacity, the number of people that you can put into a seat. So you may very well see buses that do not have many kids in them, but you have to understand that we're 80-some square miles, and so a lot of times, and we are transporting them in a lot of cases at least half that distance. So a lot of times what we run into is a timing issue more than a capacity issue. I will tell you that we have had some capacity issues as far as the number of students on a bus in a couple buses. One is in the elementary area around the Bergamont Alpine Meadows area. Is something that we're actually started addressing today with the addition of a bus. And then the other one is students up in the Fitchburg area that are middle school, high school. And what we've found is that our open enrollment student population up there has increased significantly. And so that has required us to take that same bus that is running the K6 route and take it up there for the 712 route in order to help that. So those are our two capacity issues. We have some things at Brooklyn that I think we've been able to work around with the buses that are down there and kind of spread the students a little bit from a capacity point of view. But again, the majority of our buses actually have more timing issues necessarily than capacity.
And how are we looking to correct that? Or is there a way
For
to correct
timing?
that? Yes.
I think we're in pretty good shape. We changed some things at the up in the Fitchburg area just today as well by changing a couple stops around. I think and that was actually a special ed route. I think we're in a better spot there. But if people have questions or thoughts, let us know. Sometimes things happen. For instance, one bus was a little bit late, a special needs bus today, because a parent called it in the middle of the route and it had to double back and go get a student. So we do have those anomalies that kind of happen occasionally that kind of threw off the second part of the route. So.
All right, so to make sure I'm understanding you, the correction with the 712, that was just a double, what's it called? An additional route for the same bus.
We actually ended up adding an entire new bus, which required us to, that has a first run and a second run. So it has its first run is in the Netherwood Prairie View area, Bergamont, that area. And then the second run for it goes up to the Fitchburg area for the 712 group.
Okay, so thank you very much. And then the other things, hang on, I have it somewhere here. Under the drug and alcohol testing section, it says Oregon School District shall pay for the following testing, and a bunch is crossed out. And then we've got pre-employment, reasonable suspicion, and post-accident. Part of what's crossed out is periodic and random drug testing, and I'm wondering why we've chosen to not take that, because there have been things that have shown that in other places where, heavy equipment is being used, that's a deterrent.
So that is actually a requirement of the feds. So we are still doing that. I'm not exactly sure where we took that out. But the intent of this was basically to say it was the contractor's responsibility. In the past, what would happen is the company that does the random testing, they determine who is supposed to do a test. They would actually contact us, and then we would have to go contact the contractor to basically get them to go. The intent of this language is to kind of take us out of the middle out of it, and we basically have the company that determines the random tests to basically notify the contractor directly in order to basically get the contractor or their driver to go in to get tested. So the intent was to basically speed up the process and take us out of the middle of it. we're- This kind of became an issue, quite honestly, when we've had some turnover in the director position. There was some people, we didn't notify folks as quickly as we needed to, and so this was the fix to that.
Okay, I can appreciate us being not in the middle of it, but I'm wondering if it should read something different to actually show that that is still a requirement in there, since
Oh,
this
I
is.
think the random drug screenings are still paid for by the
Yes.
district, if I'm reading this
Yep.
correctly. It's
Yep.
just that the contractors are responsible for those items down at the bottom, some of which were crossed out.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I missed that. All right, then my next question is the bus tablets. So where did we already have tablets, or where did we?
No, we actually did purchase the additional tablets in order to make sure that we could communicate with the information regarding the new system that we put in place this year, School Bus Manager, as well as it also provides a GPS signal so that we know where the buses are during the route times, as well as kind of a history of where the bus was during the time that it was on the route. So occasionally we have people that report to us that a bus was doing something, and big yellow buses, people don't always look at the name on the bus.
Yeah.
And so this is a way also for us to know if it was our bus or another bus that was.
No, I appreciate there being bus tablets. I was wondering about the financing, about where that came out of, what pocket.
I used capital equipment budget. That is a budget that I hold for those budget, and it actually I want to say it was about $30,000 for those. No, that was less, a lot less. I'm sorry, because they're about $400 each, and there's 30 of them, so about $12,000 each, something in that range. There is a monthly data plan that goes with them as well, and I want to say that's like $15 a month or something of that nature. So there was an upfront cost as well as a continuing cost.
Okay. And then my last thing was, actually, you had already mentioned it a little bit. How is the new bus management system going along with this?
I would say that there were some bumps and bruises to learning. There's some, we need to work with the contract, the software system, to make it a little bit more usable or user-friendly for parents. They inundated us a little bit with requests related to their students, and that kind of got us behind a little bit because they didn't know. And it's similar, Katie and I have had this conversation, it's similar to Infinite Campus, where we have to approve something, and parents are looking for kind of immediate gratification that things are going to change. Like when I submit it, it's going to say, okay, my kid's getting transportation. There's a whole process we have to go through to make sure that they, A, are a resident of the district, B, are in the right area, all these different things that we have to do. So we can't approve requests until we have a little bit of time. And so the hope is to work with the software vendor to basically bring a pop-up and say, your request is submitted. It will take a couple days for us to be able to get to it and approve it. It's not an immediate type of thing because so many of the requests were replicas of each other. And that was frustrating parents as well as us. So I would say there's some learning.
Growing pains.
Yeah, there's some growing pains and some learning there. But I think many people have appreciated having the routes available. Our secretaries have the routes. A number of people, because it's a web-based system, it's accessible from everybody now, for everybody now.
Nice, thank you. And then only one last thing, and I kind of talked to Andy about this ahead of time, was that under discontinuation notice, there's a typo that I would like to see amended. It says discounting a bus contract where it should be discontinuing a bus contract. Changed when whoever makes the motion, and that's all I have.
The other thing I'll mention is there are a couple places where the rate has 6 characters to the right of the decimal, and it's just that we didn't strike out the other the original 3. It's the same rate replicated several times, so most people would probably catch that, but just FYI.
Great. Any other clarifying questions over here? Anna, go ahead, and then Dr. Bush, and then we'll go to Krista.
So I just am curious about a couple of things. Can you kind of talk me through how the hourly pay is handled relative to the base rate of the vehicle relative to the mileage. I'm just trying to wrap my head around when the hourly pay is applicable and when it's not, and how that compares to the vehicle rate, I guess. Can you
Yeah.
help?
Sure, I can try.
Explain that.
And there's an expert in the audience that might have to help me. So the route pay is basically, a school day, regular school day, they turn the key on the bus to get it going. The route pay goes into effect. And really, it talks about that in here. And that's really to basically kind of pay for, the majority of it's to pay for the bus. Because a lot of them have loans and those types of things to pay for the bus. So, and then the other component of the route bus is really mileage. So depending on the number of miles that the bus drives for route pay, those are the two main components to it. Am I
Okay.
good? I'm doing pretty good? Doing good. Thank you.
So can I pause you for just
Yep,
1 second?
That's for just the route pay.
Okay.
So I was going to go into the other things, but go ahead.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand then. On the first page of the white sheet,
Okay.
we have some numbers that shows 72 to 77 passengers, 200 per day plus mileage.
That's for an older bus. The actual rates are a little bit further in, and this needs to be reorganized. Trust me.
Okay, that's
we're
where I
gonna
was
trust-
getting confused.
Yeah. If you go to section B, that's where the routes are. The actual routes are actually being.
Okay, so then a 20, the same size, 72 to 77 bus is then 259 and 44 cents a day, plus the 127 per mile, plus any fuel adjuster.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, so they're getting $259 a day plus $1.27 for each mile, and then there's another component which you're going to talk about next, the hourly pay.
Yeah, the hourly pay is not applicable to the route pay. So the hourly pay is more applicable to either shuttles and or trip buses.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I still on the right track there, Mr. Hicks?
I just identified that the hourly pay only comes into play
After.
the co-curriculars or the shuttles.
Okay.
The activities that
Above and beyond the regular
that
routes.
are not a regular route.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And I did notice that was a fairly significant jump from $15.47 to $20.90. So that was a 35% increase. And I'm just curious, when's the last time that we would have increased that hourly rate? Do we know?
We increased it a small amount, I think, last year, but the same issues that we're having with labor, this is at the rate that basically the contractors typically pay their employees.
Okay.
And so this was a point of contention with the contractors this last year that we needed to raise that up.
Okay, and I appreciate that because I'm very thankful that we have the relationship we have with our bus drivers and the transportation system we have, and I certainly want to be compensating them fairly to be able to continue to operate the way that they do. So that is, but I just was curious to know how we got to that number because it's a fairly significant increase.
Yep.
But I can understand the demand issue. That was another thing I noticed on the noon route. That one jumped up quite a bit. Is that, again, demand-based?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then, is a field trip handled similarly? Is that like an other bus run or a shuttle bus or a shuttle run? How are field trips accounted for within the school day?
Yeah, the section E talks about co-curricular trips.
Okay.
And there is a trip minimum cost there of $85.
Okay.
And then basically that includes, I believe, the first 40 miles. Is that correct? And then there's an hourly fee in addition to that.
So a field trip is considered a co-curricular trip. I'm just wanting to understand where those lie.
Well, so it gets a little complicated. If there's a field trip that happens during the same time as a route time trip, then there's an additional cost associated with that. And that's specifically because they have to find another driver.
Okay.
In addition to the driver that's doing the route time driving.
Okay.
In order to make that work.
So is there a reason that's not covered in this agreement? Is that handled separately?
It is.
Oh,
It's just,
it is.
again, it needs to be reorganized a little bit,
Okay.
make it a little easier for people to find that.
Okay, okay.
I'm trying to remember the name of what we called that, but it's probably in a section, I think it's a $50 extra charge, is that right, Jim? Off the top of my head?
Most, I think what she's referring to are field trips during the day.
Right.
Are paid the same as a after-school volleyball trip.
Okay.
Unless it happens during the school regular route time. That's what Andy's referring to.
Okay. If it conflicts with those regular routes, there's an additional expense that
Under
needs to
E,
be.
it's called route time change, or charge, sorry, not
Route
change.
time charge, okay.
If a contractor needs to hire a driver, a charge of $50 will be made for co-curricular curricular trips departing or returning during the regular AM or PM bus route.
Okay. That's helpful. And then my last question was just clarifying the summer semester routes or payments. Can you help? Is it half? Is it considered like a half day type thing?
Yeah, we kind of negotiated that a little bit. Basically, there was an increase in the what would I say? In the past, summer school route providing transportation in the summer school has a history to it. I won't get into it all now, but we were trying to keep the costs low. Believe it or not, when we started providing that transportation, it was actually paid for by a private person, contributed the money to the school district in order to do that. The person felt so strongly that we did it, he actually provided that money to us for several years anonymously. And there's some reasons that I won't get into right now why that happened and that. So now that it's become more part of our culture and we don't have that person paying for that fee anymore, we basically needed to increase the pay. So we increased the pay this time quite a bit from what it was, as well as we added a 2-hour payment for the driver. Because essentially the argument that the contractors made that I found was a good argument is that because by the time they drop off and then they have to take the students home, it's kind of messed up their whole day.
Sure.
So we pay them 2 hours kind
Sure.
of to do that. They're really sitting there for 4, but we decided we pay for 2.
Okay. That covers my clarifying questions.
All right, Dr. Bush, you're up.
I just have, and I think looking at the supporting data that introduces the contract, I think I understand it, but I just wanted to make sure that I do understand it. All the places that there are numbers crossed out, like 127 and the 114 is crossed out. The old rate was 111.4. That's not right. It would be a fraction of a penny, right?
Right.
And a fraction of a penny, and the new rate is 127.
Yeah, but on some of them it's 121.3, so it's still
Okay.
a fraction of a penny, but it's not $1.05.7.
Okay.
So because there are literally tens of thousands of miles here, maybe even hundreds of thousands of miles, those fractions do mean something.
Okay, that was, I guess, so I did understand it correctly, and the fraction of a penny does add up, which makes sense because you're talking about tens of thousands of miles. The other thing that I had was that I was wondering, now that it's passed the legislature, is there someplace in here we could add language so that school board members could be recognized as bus drivers? No, I'm just.
We could make that a requirement if you'd like.
That was my only clarifying question.
All right, Krista, any clarifying questions?
I don't really, but Caleb, I will not be driving a bus anytime soon. I think everybody will be happy about that. No, this is a really complex system, and we are very fortunate to have the contractors that we do. And I think this is a small token. It's big and it's important, but this is a small token of us understanding their challenges and how important this system is to our school district. But it's also something that we're going to be looking at into the future, right? Having a larger conversation about what does this system look like? How do we do that? How do we work with our partners? And what does the future look like for them? So Andy, I appreciate all the work. This is a really, really complex thing, and I really appreciate our partners coming to the table with us to have this intermediate discussion and then the longer discussion.
Great. Heather, questions?
Yep, I just have a couple quick ones. I'm sorry if I'm doing really horrible math here, but at the bottom of page 1 of the purple, can you help me understand how half of 159 is 129? Oh, that is a typo. Did I miss that? Okay.
No, it's just, I noticed it too, and it's supposed to be 259.44.
There it is.
I found it in the packet.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, good. My math's not so bad.
I haven't found it yet, sorry.
Oh, bottom right here, bottom, the last thing.
Oh, okay.
Half times 159
Okay.
is not 129.
My bad,
No, that's fine. I just was thinking that there was actually some complicated formula that I wasn't following, but in fact, just a typo. Okay, my second question is, can you just walk me through, I know you talked a little bit about the 4K piece, but that is almost double, right, for the route fee? And is that just because similar to summer school where there's downtime?
Yeah, it happens in the middle of the day.
Right, okay.
Right, so it's something that requires somebody to kind of,
Yeah,
they've
like have
been
their
done and
day.
now they have to come back.
Yep, okay. And then my last question is actually in your answer to Leslie, right, you said something about open enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
And I thought that we're not on the hook, or there's probably a nicer word to say for that, than for open enrollment.
Yeah, so we are not legally on the hook. That is absolutely correct. When people apply for open enrollment,
We don't guarantee it.
They are not required or not allowed transportation. However, we have had a practice in our district, especially in the Fitchburg area, where another school district is right next to us, and literally our buses kind of pass in the night.
Right.
That students, if they would walk to a current stop, they could get on one of our buses.
Okay.
It just so happens that that has created some capacity issues in that area.
Okay, so it's not that we are changing our routes or doing something.
No, we can't.
It's just capacity.
We can't actually drive into another school district unless we're, like, the only way between our school district's here and our school
Yeah.
district's here, and we have to go through the middle of it. But we can't actually stop and pick up their students
The things you
unless
learn.
they give us permission to, which
They won't.
the district has
Right.
not allowed that, yes.
Okay, and then one follow-up question. So taking open enrollment, we're done with that. But with FES and RCI and the kind of shuffling that has happened in the past few years, do we anticipate as people are, like when we first started, you could choose kind of
Yeah.
where you were going based on, where you started. Is that having any sort of financial impact of?
I would say that it adds to the logistical complexity of what we do.
Okay.
I was looking at a route today where it's actually in the middle of Oregon and it's going to FES.
Right.
And what happens, it was actually, just like 3 hours ago, I was looking at this. What happens is, we've got the bus that's there, and so then somebody else asks, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, the bus is there, we can put them on too.
Okay.
The problem is it will never end then.
Right.
Type of thing. So we probably need to kind of consider that a little bit more.
As part of the big
Because we had a third grader or a fourth grader on it. Actually, there was probably a fifth grader on it, and then we put a third grader on it, and then the third grader had a sibling who's a kindergartner, and then all of
Right,
like,
right. Okay, good, just to understand. No further comment on that for now. Okay, thanks.
Dr. Lakuta.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping you can educate me on a few things. So, there's comment about change the size of the minimum number from 74 to 72 to save a single seat from an insurance cost perspective. And we're talking also about, having buses at capacity. Although I know you mentioned that most of our buses are not necessarily at capacity, but I'm wondering, obviously there are pros and cons on both ends, and who pays for the insurance? Is that covered?
So I apologize if I wrote the word insurance. It's actually the purchase of the bus was the argument that the contractors brought to me, is that a 72 passenger was, do you remember the $10,000 less? Something like that?
It's just easier
And the problem right now is trying to find buses is like everything else on the supply chain, there's an issue there. So that was the argument that they said is, hey, if we could lower that number from 74 to 72, then that would be a big help to them.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And that kind of leads into my next question, because we also, it seems like it's very prescriptive, and I realize this is just for 23-24, but it mentions the bus models as Forward Control and Thomas C2.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to understand why, and I mean, would we make allowances for, I know we've talked about electric buses and,
So that is kind of some outdated language. When I got here, there was a huge preference to what's forward control buses, which is kind of the flat nose buses. The feeling was that they were significantly safer than kind of the conventional bus. A C2 bus is kind of a bus that I think just about everybody has replicated now, which has kind of a sloped front nose so that you can better see what's in front of you, plus the requirement federal requirement that they have stop arms.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea there is to push students away from the bus, so anytime the bus stops, the stop arm goes out and they can basically, they're not right in front of the bus, so we're not going to accidentally have a problem there. So basically we need to probably change the language a little bit. The intent is in the past to have those front forward control buses, A, they're a little bit more expensive right from the get-go, and B, I think they're a little bit more of a maintenance problem. No, maybe not.
It's personal preference. And I think the wording could be conventional style. A conventional style bus has an engine out in front, like Andy was talking.
Yeah.
The forward controls are the flat nose, and they can make those larger if you pay that extra cost. But the availability of those has just gone down. They aren't making them quite as much.
okay.
That's a big problem.
I would suggest we have Mr. Hudson come and and speak into the microphone, just so the folks at home can hear. So come on over.
There won't be anything more to say.
Well, that's okay. Absolutely. I know how much you have.
It's on the top of the microphone, probably.
Expertise.
Welcome to the table, Mr. Hagstrom.
Hello. Glad to be here, and thank everyone for the support and the nice words that you've all said. It does mean a lot to me and the rest of my colleagues, so thank you.
So my question was really about flexibility, and is that something that we need to be prescriptive about, or should we work on
The
some
intent with the
flexibility?
C2 was to kind of open the door, actually, so we probably should just clean it up and be more, less prescriptive and a little bit more general.
Okay. And then also fuel adjuster. So it's not bus specific, so do all buses get roughly the same mileage?
No, not the same mileage. It's basically based on fuel costs. So the fuel adjuster basically says whatever the price of fuel is, and there's a chart, I believe it was in there, that basically says, I think it's like every 10 or 12 cents, they get another penny per mile that they go. And the intent there is to basically represent that their fuel costs are going up, so therefore we need to pay them a little bit more, or going down depending on the year. So last year I think we were in the $5 range for diesel, and this year it's for
29.
29, so a little bit less than last year, which is a good thing to the budget.
Okay, all right. That's all my clarifying questions. Thank you.
Great. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is my mic on? Okay, it's on now. I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Dr. Bush, second by Ms. Wright. I will note that we did talk about one change to the language under discontinuation notice, just to correct that typo.
And
That
That's
was
in the agenda.
just in the purple.
But the extra strikeouts on the rates, there's a couple places where it's a 6-digit number, it should only be 3.
Okay.
Might I just ask, whenever there's a percentage point there, that we round up rather than down?
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. Doesn't hurt to ask.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? Go ahead, Ms. Bijak.
Yeah, I didn't ask this during the clarifying question, but I do want to discuss it as far as the budget. So I recognize that this does put us over what we had allocated by $47,000. And I recognize that we've got a funding source, at least for the time being, although I might call them one-time funds because they're somewhat dependent upon interest earnings. So I guess my comment would be that, I think we do need to be thinking long-term about this, no different than we just talked about being over budget on the co-curriculars, that those are things that we'll need to be thinking through because we can make it work, I think, this year without going above the referendum, but we'll need to be planning for that accordingly.
So just a little bit of the budget consideration that I did take into account here. For sure, the interest earning number, the interest earnings that we're getting right now, we should not continue to count on. I didn't budget at that level, so I budgeted at a lower level. So, the last 15 years has been an anomaly in what our savings accounts have been getting, right? Like 0 is not normal, but it feels like normal because it's been 15 years of getting 0. So if we can go prior to 2008, when everything kind of started at that level, I think where we're budgeted at is probably a pretty good spot. I've had several discussions trying to anticipate that. So this year I would anticipate, just so everybody understands, our interest earnings will exceed our budget, but only because that 5.5% that we're getting right now, and that is really about what we're getting, is not sustainable. It's probably closer to, 3.5, 4, something like that is probably more of a long-term sustainable, and that's what I'm budgeting on, so I'm not counting on that 5.5%. The Medicare revenue that we're getting, I think part of that's based on feds and stuff like that, but the other part of that is based on the needs of our students. And I will tell you, and Candace could come up here and tell you, we have had a lot of significant needs this year, and so I'm feeling fairly comfortable like that revenue stream should be pretty good as well. So I totally appreciate what you just said, because that's the way I have to think constantly. I think we're pretty good with those 2 revenue streams. I did not take them up to the highest level.
Any other discussion? Dr. Bush?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Anna just said, that I think that was the other thing that I was thinking is that, and it goes back to the question I tried to ask about the co-curriculars and the budgetary concerns, and I completely support these adjustments, and I think these are critical things that we're doing, and the changes that we're making are really important so that we're supporting staff and everything that people are doing. But there are, I think, good budget questions that we have to start thinking about, and I think that's probably something we'll have more discussion about going forward. But I had the same thought, is that there are, and I think we should just expect that the costs involved here are just going to keep going higher. I noticed, just for instance, it's kind of interesting when you look at the fuel adjuster. It says, for example, if the price of diesel fuel at the pump is in the range of $1.41 to $1.45 a gallon. So, needless to say, yes, there are lots of costs in here.
That was a few years ago.
Yeah, that was a few years ago. So, anyway, I had the same exact thought. I just wanted to kind of jump in there as well.
Krista, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a couple things. I think, Caleb and Anna, you were exactly right, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, this is the type of thing school districts are having to deal with now because of the funding from the state. It's one-time funds instead of funding us per inflation. gets us in these positions of we have growing expenses and we've got to find one-time funds to fund them. And so now we're going to be going into different conversations about, okay, how do we manage these things given the scenario we're in? So I give Andy a lot of credit of figuring out these are needs that we have to find funds for. And we've got to find funds in different places we've never had to look. And now as a board, we are faced with these long-term discussions of how do we fund these things, knowing we do need to continue to plan on one-time funds, but how else are we going to fund these long-term annual programs? So again, this is a position that we've been put in as a school district, and we're a fortunate school district because we have more funds than others, but it's going to be a challenge for us.
Thank you, Krista. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, Katie, please call the roll.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you again, Mr. Hagstrom.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move on to C3, 4K contract increase for 2023 and 2024. Dr. Bergstrom and Mr. Weiland.
Yes, certainly not or last, but certainly not least. We have our community partners who run our 4K sites, and also obviously have labor challenges as we all do. Last year we were able to give them a several $100 increase. This year we are not able to give them quite as much, but similar to staff, we were able to give them a larger increase last year as well. This increase is, in that 4.5% range at $150 more than what they got this year. We will obviously also be looking and kind of seeing what our comparables are doing. I can tell you that some of my peers have talked about some type of consumer price index look at things in a multi-year contract, similar to the concerns that we have in being able to maintain some type of a partner relationship over the long term and making sure that they have a way to pay for their staff. So I don't know that how that will work out, but there have been discussions amongst my peers in that regard.
Okay, we'll start with clarifying questions if there are any. Heather, go ahead.
I just have a question on a little bit of background information. So 4K partners obviously vary in that OPI is a different format than Mariposa, right? A different structure. So this is getting very high level. So when a Oregon student goes to 4K at Mariposa, is Mariposa charging the family less because we are putting in?
So actually, I was kind of nodding, but I probably shouldn't have. The part that's the 4K program is actually fairly standard amongst all of our partners. So even though OPI has this concept of, and my kids went there, where it's kind of like a, am I doing the right one? This is the one at St. John's, right? OPI?
Yes.
Yes.
OPI, right.
Yep, P.
Yeah.
So it's got this kind of, parent cooperative type of situation going on. Really, the 4K program is staffed, it's tuition based on these numbers that are in here, just like Mariposa. It's the other things that maybe happen afterwards, where the OPI doesn't really have a wraparound program.
Sure.
And they don't charge for that. Mariposa would have a wraparound program and charge for those types of services.
I guess what I'm asking, maybe you wouldn't know this, and that's fine, is I understand that Mariposa is charging for wraparound care, but is that less than the market rate for a whole day of a 4-year-old? You know what I mean? Like, I guess are we getting double dipping in that people are making money off of the parents and we're contributing this funding? Am I making sense?
I think I know what you're asking. I think they would say that in fact, we've heard them say that a couple times, that the 4K program is not as profitable to them as the wraparound care.
Got it. Okay,
So kind of changing the frame a little bit there.
got it. Okay, helpful. Thanks.
Is that fair?
Other clarifying questions? Ms. Wright?
So this, I support this, first of all, but my question becomes, I know that we have seen a greater special ed need in our 4K programs, and I'm wondering how that fits into that, if they are paid, or if they have special ed support,
Yeah,
and how that's paid differently or anything else.
So they don't provide the special education support. We push into those programs with the supports. So those costs are ours, and then we go into their programs.
Perfect, thank you.
Krista, any clarifying questions on the phone?
None for me, thank you.
Okay. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Heather.
I'll second.
Second by Dr. Lakuta. Any further discussion on this item? All right, Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. All right, next up we have our discussion items, committee reports, starting with policy. Heather.
We just had a policy committee meeting today, and we are circling back on the next date for our next meeting, and we'll be able to report more out then.
Okay, vision steering, Anna.
Nothing specific to report from visioning.
All right, thank you. So that takes us to our informational items. I'll turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to go through items E1 through 3.
Thank you. So with visioning and strategic planning, I think it's important to note that we'll be talking about that more at our next board meeting when we have our K through 6 schools sharing their goal reports, the results of last year's work and their goals and action steps moving forward. And then the following meeting we'll have our middle school and high school present, because on the 23rd we also have a committee of a whole, then a board meeting, and then a work session. So it's going to be quite a marathon of a night. So we'll break up a little bit of the presentation and have the secondary schools at the following meeting. We have many times over spoken about our priorities, and the priorities were extraordinarily helpful to us as we put together the significant goals for the school year. And what you'll hear from the schools next meeting is really how their goals fit into this, particularly goals 1 and goal 2. And then a lot of what we've been discussing tonight is about 4 and 5, right? These really fantastic community partnerships with our 4K programming, our bus contractors, and also how all of this, all of these many factors, the labor market, the amazing partners that we have, the rising costs of all things that are associated not just with the district, but in our partnerships businesses too, how all of that is impacting the fiscal sustainability of the Oregon School District. And then teaching and learning update, as I said, that'll be next week. So I think I'm just going to move on to the superintendent report because it's kind of a fun one. It is a report I think that really has a lot of appreciation and gratitude embedded within it. And the first, of course, is the school board itself. If for those of you who didn't know, last week was Wisconsin's School Board Week. And so we want to thank all of our Board of Education members for their leadership and the dedication that they show to our students, our families, and our community, because this is something they do purely out of the love in their heart. And I think that that makes their service extra special and meaningful, and thank you all.
And then, you know who else does something pretty terrific? Those are the teams of people in our schools who take care of the building and grounds. And October 2nd was School Custodial and Grounds Appreciation Day. And we really have some fantastic people who did this part of meeting the needs of students and staff. They make our buildings something we all feel really proud to be in every day, and something that when people come to us from other places, they share that they're really impressed with the level of day-to-day cleanliness in our building and the fact that our custodians really feel like a big, important part of our team, because they are. So we're very grateful to them and all they do to make it the environment enjoyable to be in. And then October is National Principals Month. So we want to recognize all of our amazing school principals. You see quite a team on the screen here. People that I feel very honored to be able to work with every day. And have nothing but immense pride and gratitude for all of them. And then we had our first Around the World Lunch Day. And it was Germany. And you can see Frau Waschensky, our middle school German teacher there, with a lot of enthusiasm on German Day. As a matter of fact, she worked with Sarah Tomaszewicz, our school nutrition director, to help come up with the menu. So it was a bit of a collaboration with our students who are German language students and the teachers. So there are some amazing food things listed here in German that I really know I'll butcher. So I'll say the ones I think I can say. Schnitzel, okay. Appelschweiben. I mean, this is great. As a matter of fact, we have our German exchange students from our German sister school arriving next week. I think we have a luncheon. Thank you, tomorrow. A luncheon with them on Monday, and I'm hoping that Frau Waschensky can give me a few tips so that I can greet them in German, because I have to say a few words. But we're excited to have them joining us, and how cool was it that the Around the World Day right before they got here was German food. These are our worm watchers. You see what they have in their hands? This is Mrs. Hausner's science class at Rome Corners. They've been observing worm behavior and talking about the importance of worms in the ecosystem. This, of course, reminds me of the smell of spring after a rain shower when you come outside and there are all these little guys wriggling all over the sidewalk. It's also the last, from mid-September to mid-October, is Hispanic Heritage Month. And the students at Forest Edge Elementary School shared part of their culture in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. They shared food, traditions, music, and their roots. And I think you'll hear Ms. Majeski at the school presentations next week talking about how multilingualism is a superpower, and it is celebrated as such, and that's exciting. And speaking of exciting, congratulations to Lorenz Fratkin Annan. Lorenz was recently selected as the winner of the 2023 Fall Youth Concerto Competition. Lorenz will be featured in the upcoming youth concert series and public performances. So congratulations to Lorenz. And then we had a sing-out at a tenor bass festival. So we had 29 students from 7th grade through 12th grade in the Oregon choirs attended the sing-out tenor bass choir festival hosted by UW-Milwaukee. There were over 1,000 students from around southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois that attended this festival designed specifically for singers who are bass tenors and those with changing voices. How cool is that? And we also want to say congratulations to our All-State Honors Choir participants. So they were nominated and selected, these students, to participate in the 2024 Wisconsin Choral Directors Association all-state honors choir. So from OHS, we have Apollo Marks, Tristan Jackson, Leo Washensky, and Olive Anderson. And for the middle school, we have Annika Monti, Tenzin Holenbeck, Tristan Harm, and Milo Burns. So congratulations to all of them. That is a really cool thing. They were nominated based on their maturity, vocal technique, intonation, music, independence, rehearsal manner, and cooperation and responsibility. Those are pretty amazing things to be selected for. So once again, congratulations to the group. The all-state choirs will perform at the state conference at Lawrence University in January. And then Mr. Stace's advanced woodworking manufacturing class, they're at the beginning stages of making Adirondack chairs. And in addition to earning high school credit for this course, they will also receive credit for entry-level woodworking courses through Madison College. So they're earning dual credit for this particular class, and that's a really exciting opportunity for our students. We have some state-bound athletes. Congratulations to Ella Piotr and Kate Thorne. They've qualified for the state tennis tournament, and that will begin on Thursday. And then girls golf. Congratulations to Drew Hoffer and Addison Sable. They qualified for the WIAA Division I state meet. And also to the entire girls golf team for placing third in the WIAA Division I sectional. That's really great. The state tournament started today and continues tomorrow at University Ridge. And then this one really captures my heart. The JV2 soccer team enjoyed some time at Beehive Homes, and they recently volunteered to help with bingo night at Beehive Homes here in Oregon. And here's a direct quote from the coordinator at Beehive. They were polite, respectful, enthusiastic, fun, engaging, and kind. They did a great job of making the residents feel special. They not only helped with bingo, but had shopped for all the prizes and left the remaining ones for me to use. They were an amazing group, among the best I've ever had. So this is a really amazing illustration of our strong family and community partnerships, one of our values. A great example also of the skills and characteristics that students are developing as they're pursuing Portrait of a Graduate. Something I think to be really proud of. Okay, it's coming. It's going to be a big week. So the parade is Friday at 1:30. Anybody watching who hasn't experienced that, you absolutely must. It's a time warp back to a long time ago when communities were just probably a little bit different. I remember the first time I experienced it, I was absolutely blown away by the fact that the streets were packed to watch all of these floats go by, and what a community experience it was. There's route information on the website if some of you want to go back and take a look. The football game is in the evening is against Sun Prairie West. Kickoff is at 7 at Panther Stadium. And then community members are also invited to participate in the OHS Student Council and FFA food drive. They can drop off non-perishable items in the OHS main office right here at 456 North Perry Parkway. And for more details, go to OregonSD.org. You'll see announcements right on the front page. We also have some homecoming info on our podcast. This was kind of fun. We got to speak to Athletic Director Spencer Grant, Coach Kissling, two of our football leaders, our captains, about the game and what it means to be an Oregon athlete and what they hope as far as people who are able to attend any of our games, not just football. And then we also were able to have a podcast with our student council co-presidents, as well as the two co-advisors, to talk about homecoming festivities in general. And then we had a great conversation with the leaders of all of our PTOs, Forest Edge, Oregon, which covers Prairie View, Netherwood, and RCI, and Brooklyn. It was really nice of them to all come together and to talk about the future of really not just the PTOs, but how people in general, how family members in general can become involved in their children's schools. And I think that's it.
Great, wonderful report as usual. Thank you. So that brings us to closing. Future agenda, so we will meet again in 2 weeks. And a reminder that we'll start with the Committee of the Whole meeting, and that starts at 5:15, correct, Katie? And then we'll have our regularly scheduled board meeting at 6:30 that evening. On that agenda, on the regular board meeting agenda, we have the approval of OSD safety plans, the approval of our 23-24 budget, and the final approval of our tax levy. And then, as Dr. Bergstrom said, we'll follow that up with the elementary school reports that evening. So with that, we can move to checkout. I'll start over on this side. Ms. Wright, anything for checkout?
Yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate the food days. My twins came home and telling me about eating schnitzel and asking me, Mom, did you ever eat schnitzel whenever you lived in Germany? And I'm like, well, yeah. And it started this whole conversation where I got to talk about that, and they got to hear a few more other things. So it was really kind of cool kickoff at a conversation at home, and they really enjoyed it. So thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Bush? Anna?
I was going to mention the fact that the German exchange program begins tomorrow because along with Caleb, we're host families for students. And so we get to meet them tomorrow, and they're here for 3 weeks. And we're just really excited. I baked an apple pie already for our German students. So I'm really excited.
I do bake a mean apple pie.
Well, get on that.
Krista, anything for checkout?
Nothing for me.
All right, Heather? Dr. Lakuta? Nothing for me, thank you. All right, nothing from me either. So with that, just need one more motion.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by Dr. Lakuta. Is there a second? I guess we have to do roll call.
Dr. Lakuta? Yes. Ms. Wright? Yes. Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes, 7-0, meeting adjourned at 8:03. Thank you, everyone.